Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another great episode on Beyond the Current Situation. So, uh, Elliot, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Lily. Great to be
Uh,
here.
oh, my pleasure. So, I want to get right down to it so we can really make the best use out of this time together and really bring a powerful conversation to the audience. So, you, we're going to talk today about teen suicide, depression, and overcoming something as tragic as such. So I want to direct actually the opening question to you, Elliot. Here you are. It's January 23rd, 2015. And the cell phone, your son's cell phone suddenly goes off. You have a knock on the door. As I understand it, FedEx hands you a note or a package, and it's a 6-page suicide note from your teen son. Now what?
First of all, Lily, thank you for having me on. You can imagine what a parent at that moment is going through. We were frantically all day trying to find him. The cell phone was turned off. Um, I called immediately his mom, and I said, we just got this note, and she started to call some group, the hospitals and so forth. I called the school. I called the police at the school, asked them to go to the dorm room immediately. And she called me back and said, the sheriff is going to call you in 1 minute. And he called and he said, I'm sorry to tell you, your son is dead. He's been a John Doe all night. We didn't know that was your son. But apparently he jumped in front of a truck on the highway
Oh
and took
my
his life.
goodness.
And
I
so the
my
process began. It's horrible.
Yeah. And my deepest condolences, of course, to you and your
Thank
wife.
you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Question, so that I and the audience can understand. So how old was your son? Where was he when this happened? And where was he living?
He was a 19-year-old sophomore at the University of Montana in Missoula, living at the dorm. It was winter semester. He was taking 2 classes. He wanted to go up there. He was playing on the hockey team, so he wanted to be there, and took a couple classes. The regular session hadn't started yet. And so he was in his dorm and made his bed, shut his cell phone off, left his wallet there. It was exceptionally neat. No drugs, no alcohol. Obviously mailed hours before that suicide note, probably close to 5 o'clock. It was already after midnight when he went up to the highway.
I'm getting chills right now. You don't have to express this or give details if you don't want to go down that memory. If you can, and if you're willing to, give us the gist of that 6-page suicide note. What did it say?
So teenagers write apparently long suicide notes. I learned that later on. And most of it is rambling. There were all types, probably 4 of the 6 pages were rambling about the New York Jets and about hockey and about people that had liked when he was watching them. He was really into that. But the first page, the first paragraph, excuse me, Lily, was the main paragraph. And what it said was, Mom and Dad, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I never would have told you how I felt. I never would have asked for your help, and I never would have taken your help.
Oh my God.
And it was based on that we actually started our charity, A Brighter Day, because of that, because we had to take action. He mentioned 3 times in there, Mom, I hope you can get over this. Dad, he's mentioned once, Dad, I'm sorry. He mentioned some words to his brother, mentioned some words to his sister, um, mentioned he missed the cats, things like that. But basically, that first main paragraph was the main paragraph. So I read that on the way. I read the whole suicide note several times on the way up to Montana to claim his body. But I really focused on that one paragraph on the way home. And that's what changed everything after that.
Hmm. Yeah, that one paragraph. Um, Something he'd been thinking about for a long time. He never would have asked for your help. And what was that other third important
I
sentence?
never would have told you how I felt,
Ah,
never would have asked for your help, and I never would have taken your help.
wow. So I'm sure you have lamented over this and for the last whatever 9.5 years, of course. But I'm curious, um, does that sound like to you the initial opening or that initial paragraph was letting you off the hook? Like
Well,
not,
that's exactly what he's trying to do. Lily,
yeah.
I think he was trying to figure out how to say to his parents, it's not your fault, it's my fault.
Oh, poor
Because that
thing.
really doesn't matter, because as parents, you are forever guilt-ridden because there are 100 things you would do differently or signs that you wish you picked up. And so for the word paragraphs that you wish you completed on his behalf, where he might have started it, asking for help and you didn't understand the paragraph, or he just pulled back during the paragraph. Um, there are lots of things that parents are going to regret here. I've learned that you can't change any of the facts on the ground. So no matter how bad and horrible you feel, you can't undo a thing here in this
Right.
life.
You've got to just, yeah, you be in the moment and this is the now. What what things, if you were to look back in the shadows of regret or like not seeing a sign, were there any signs that you could think of now, you and his mom?
You know, his mom had a little bit of history of depression herself.
Okay.
I wish she
Okay.
picked up on it. She should have known a little bit better than that. And that's a different discussion entirely. But little
Well,
things.
it can be part of the discussion as well, because we're helping people that are in this audience right now, around the globe. When there is, and it sounds like what you're alluding to is when there is depression history in the family, especially if it's mom or dad, that's that's something to be addressed while with all of our children, correct?
Well, you have a higher propensity to depression if it's already running in the family.
Yeah.
But
Case.
today, and I know all the world of statistics and depression, and that's the world that I live in a lot, is that there are more teens with depression and suicidal thoughts than ever in the history of the United States that they've been
What
seeing this. And
what are
so,
those stats today? Tell our audience
oh
what
my
those.
goodness, let me tell you something really scary. And by the way, the more affluent the community, the higher the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
The less
I
the
know that.
poverty, the less.
Yes.
And so when I first started with this program, creating our charity, A Brighter Day, I went to the unified school district that he went to high school in, and we convinced them to do a survey of high schoolers about depression and mental health. And I figured, and they figured, that about 5% of their students will have considered depression or suicide at least once. That's what they figured it would be. And it turned out in this affluent community, it was 50.
Yes, I was gonna say it's so much higher than that.
And so
50% chance.
50% thoughts of it. Yeah, which is
Yeah,
terrible.
chance of thoughts to suicide or
Or sadness, depression. They don't
sadness,
really call it
depression.
depression, just so I'm really feeling really sad. I'm really stressed out.
Yeah,
Um,
anxiety.
it's amazing what's going on. So it's we have the most anxious, stressed out, and depressed generation in the history of the United States right now, which is really scary. It should scare every parent to understand that the questions that your parent asked you about school and your life no longer apply to you asking your children. It's a new paradigm. Social media wasn't around, Instagram, Snap, TikTok, none of these things were around. And so your child is more distracted and lives in 20 and 30-second sound bites that none of us ever grew up in.
Yeah. And I want to get back to that. I want to get back to those apparent reasons why we're in that 50% potential bracket in affluent areas. And I want to talk about the ones not in affluent areas as well. But let's go back for now. Let's circle back to those signs. So one was that mom suffered with depression early on. Was that during your marriage, before your marriage, and did you know about it?
I did know about it. It was before our marriage, and then it was during our marriage a little bit. And I
Okay.
don't want to tell you she was depressed the whole time and living on Prozac. There were just periods in her life that she was feeling very sad.
Mhm.
One of the signs, Lily, as you know, and your listeners know, one of the biggest signs, particularly for teens, because that's my world, of depression is withdrawal. It's social withdrawal. You withdraw your friends, you withdraw from school, you withdraw from activities, you withdraw from family.
Mhm.
And so there were times that my ex-wife, when she was a writer, she would climb in a tree just to be alone. She said she wanted to a tree for inspiration to write, but in reality, she wanted to be alone. And so for Jake, he was withdrawing from his friends. He was withdrawing from his family. I didn't notice it.
You
His
didn't notice
friends
it.
didn't notice
Why do
it.
you think you didn't notice it?
I
Obviously, he wasn't living at home. That
no,
obviously.
but just that. But I look. There's a difference between, or there's a slight difference between being a stupid teenager, which I was, and being a depressed teenager. They kind of look the same in a lot of ways.
How?
Well, when you're a stupid teenager, you're doing stupid things, you're saying stupid things. You don't really want to be part of the family because they're annoying the heck out of you. You're annoying the heck out of them.
Okay,
Uh,
so that's what you mean by stupid. Okay.
yeah, but
Eh,
for him, his sleep. What I did notice during holiday break, Christmas break, was that his sleep pattern was interrupted
Oh, this is
completely.
such a big sign that I'd like the audience to be aware. Any parents, we want to really sh shout this out to any of our parents, Elliot, or people becoming that are planning to become parents one day, or people that are siblings of, of where they're noticing some signs that those interrupted sleep patterns, like sleeping really, really long hours, right?
Yeah, more than ever, it's just interrupted, or less than ever.
Explain ways that it would look like. What does interrupted sleep look like for someone's teen sibling or child or friend?
Well, I think a better description would be, because I noticed he was up like 12 and 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, just hacking around on his cell phone doing nothing. But his friends said it better to me when they said after he died, I said, we should have known something was wrong when he seemed to be sleeping when we were awake and awake when we were sleeping.
Wow. Yeah, you're right now, Elliot, you are talking about something I've never heard anyone say. So it's the opposite of what I was assuming, because this is what I hear and read about the long sleeping, always sleeping. But what you're saying is it's the interrupted sleep, those teens that are up and down all night long, up while everyone's sleeping and awake while everyone's sleeping. Uh, right? Up when everyone is sleeping, and then he's sleeping while everyone's awake, correct?
Correct. He even went at Christmas break. I heard the door open at about 1 in the morning, to the front door of the house open. And I went down and I went over there to see what's going on. And he was out of his bed. And I saw he had taken his sneakers. And I knew he had said to me earlier that night, he said, Dad, I'm going to go for a run tonight, because he liked running. So 1 in the morning, he went for a run by us. That's totally wrong. Now,
Yeah, that's so abnormal.
maybe he was already thinking it that night, trying to clear his head, trying to prepare. I think mentally he was already partway there to suicide. Here's a better way to describe it. He said, I want you to think, this is for, again, because ideally in the teen world as a parent, I'm not a PhD or a counselor. I'm a parent who works in charity and really gets it. But I want you to think of depression as kind of a life, as kind of a box. It's a 6-sided box, 4 walls, a top and a bottom. And for most of us, the walls are blue and the walls are kind of gray, and your day is kind of happy, okay. In that we work in that world, just blue and gray. But for a depressed person, they introduce the color black,
Mm.
darkness. And suddenly their walls, all 4 walls, become very black, and the top and the bottom are black. And at some point, there's no blue anymore. There's no light coming in into these walls. And then they start thinking, yesterday was pretty crappy. Today's even worse. Tomorrow's going to be even worse than this. No one's going to miss me anyway. What the heck?
Mm.
And that's where I think he went to, because he made a comment a day or two before he went back to school at spring break. I was in the kitchen cooking, and he said, Dad, when I was in high school, I was feeling a little suicidal.
Wow.
So I put the knife down immediately, I was chopping vegetables. I put the knife down. I said, so where are you right now? I said, you want to talk about this? He said, no, I'm in such a better place than that, Dad. I said, you sure? Sure you just don't want to talk about it? What's going on? He said, Dad, there's nothing to talk about. Just in high school, I gave it some thought.
Wow.
Now, what he was really saying is, Dad, I don't know how to say it to you, but I'm in that place right now.
He's saying,
But
help me.
help me. But his words to me said, I'm okay, Dad. I got over it. And that's what I heard. He couldn't say, help me. He just said, I'm here now, but he couldn't do it. So he put himself in the past tense at that moment.
Oh my goodness. So what would you say then to people that maybe last week their child said something similar to that? Uh, what would you tell them? How would you suggest a parent or sibling or friend or colleague do as a next step, even though they say, I'm in a good place now?
I would talk about getting some counseling, but here's the problem you're going to encounter. Counseling, there's no one size that fits everybody. Counseling, one-on-one counseling, which takes in most places 8 to 10 weeks to get. So here your child is cutting themselves or doing something, and it takes you 8 weeks to get an appointment. That's a lifetime.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not the person that wants to sit down and be cross-examined by a counselor. So I know our charity, we came up with a all 50 state 24/7 teen text crisis hotline that I think would have worked for my son when he was awake. He could have texted counselors middle of the night, perfect time for him, or after class or during class or whatever, and could have texted and said whatever he needed to say. And they could have been going back and forth. And, Lily, we do this, we study this. And we found that, and there are about 30 new people that joined us every month, 30 new teens that joined this texting program every month. And within 5 minutes, they all asked the same question via texting.
What's
And
that?
am I the only one feeling this way?
Oh my goodness. There's always that thing, right? I had someone on this show, Beyond the Current Situation, several months ago on depression and adult suicide. There were two ladies, two sisters who lost their brother at a younger age, and then they lost their other brother at an older age, and they were totally blindsided because they thought, look what we went through for the first one. Like, we would never do that. We all swore we would never do that. So that was a crazy, very, very insightful podcast. Now, what you're telling me here is with teens, they almost come to mom or dad, or maybe they go and say that to a friend, where, but not in truth. But you're saying that when you provide this now with a brighter day, and we're going to give, obviously, all of this is going to be in the show notes. You can even leave messages here, and Elliot will also communicate with you as well. But this 24/7 texting, the one common denominator was everyone asked, am I the only one feeling like this? And it's so funny you say this. The reason I bring this up, Elliot, is because the woman who also started an organization, and she's an activist with suicide, and she could relate for adult suicide. Her advice at the end of the day, I remember clearly at the end of the day, was, you're not alone. Know that you're not alone. And I find that it's like chilling, because don't we all feel alone when we're sad and depressed?
Right. But I also want you to put that in perspective. If you're talking to a suicidal person
Yes.
and you say you're all alone, that might make you feel better. I'm not sure that is interpreted in that recipient's brain the way you'd probably want it to be interpreted.
What, that you're not alone, she said. She wants people to
Right.
know you're not alone. There's
Right.
other people that are suffering like you are.
Right. But we want them to know that we love them, we care about them.
Exactly.
All that has to be so important. If the hard part, and what you're talking about is the hard part, that advice is, how do you reach this person now whose walls are all black?
Right.
How do you
Right.
unwind that and put color in their life?
And how
And that's
do you do
really
that?
hard.
Through a brighter day, how is that done?
Well, we do that. We start with that with counseling. We offer different techniques, but
Okay.
here's what you can do. If you look for 4 or 5 different things you can do as a parent, because I'm going to assume that a lot of people listening here are parents.
Yes.
And they're like, wow. Okay. So the first thing you could do as a parent, let me run through a few steps. Parents are now ill-equipped to ask the right questions, because the typical question they ask to their teenagers is, how's school? And then you get caveman answers that are monosyllabic. Fine, okay, really? Fine, mom, I'm okay. and you don't really get any answer. And you're thinking, well, I guess it's okay. Typical teenager, they're terrible communicators. And now that's very true. But you got to learn to ask now better questions. What's your favorite class? What did you learn today? Why is that your favorite class? Who's your favorite teacher? What's your worst class? What's the teacher like in your worst class? How's your best friend doing? How are they doing in that class? Maybe the two of you aren't even going to class. You and your best friend, you both checked out. So you've got to ask better questions.
Yeah,
How do you
specific
specific?
questions.
How do you ask
Actually,
those
not,
questions? It's
oh, I'm
tough.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but before you go to the next, it's more like, and I mean this in a really kind way, and I want to respect and be responsible the way I say this, because I'm a parent too, but be a caring parent, not just how was your day and move on. It's like really care and start digging for what makes your child tick, what makes your child not tick, right?
Right. In-depth questions, in depth. Now, how do you ask them and where do you ask them? The best place to ask them is dinner, a meal. And that means you've got to make every dinner cell phone free. You
Thank
can't
you. Thank you.
you can't call grandma during dinner. You can't call the older sibling at college during dinner because you want everybody to talk at the dinner table. Nobody brings a cell phone. Nobody texts. No electronics at dinner. And it gives you an opportunity, kind of good old-fashioned opportunity for conversation. And by the way, kids hate that because a lot of parents have said to me, look, we all bring our cell phone and we're all texting. I can't tell them to not do it. I said, get a basket and make it fun and put everybody have their phone in a basket.
That's
You can do
it.
it.
That's it.
Now,
I couldn't agree more. I raised my son like that. I was like between those little, back in our day, Elliot, like my child is 26 now, but what was that famous whatever they used to play the games on? There's no electronics. Take that away. That didn't exist on the table. So specific questions, and best time at dinner time, no devices on
right.
at the dinner table.
And
Okay?
ask good questions. Now, we also live in a world where sometimes with sports and hobbies, dinner can be difficult. So
Correct.
the next best place is when you're driving them to these activities, no radio, no headphones, no iPods, nothing, just the same kind of conversation. And
Yep.
have them sit in the front seat next to you, not in the back seat where they can not have to say anything
Yep.
because they're in their own world, listening to music, and you're listening to music or talk radio. Turn all electronics off in the car. And then if that's not working effectively, once a week, take a walk with your teen around the block, not necessarily a hike, because we're all programmed to talk and walk at the same time. And so
Interesting.
that's effective. And then if you feel that you found something's wrong, and by the way, I have to warn parents, you have to be exceptionally non-judgmental. Don't try to fix them because I know you want to fix them because that's how parents are. I'm a parent too. Don't fix them. Just listen to them. Offer some advice. Ask them better questions. Say, look, I know you're struggling in chemistry. Would you like me to get a chemistry tutor for you? Would you like me to get you some help? Or is there another problem really going on in
Great
chemistry?
question.
And so work on that. Then you can begin
And
to
then
take,
get a professional, and then
yeah.
get a
And
professional.
so sometimes you think, well, I'll just go to the school counselor and get help. They've got 4 school counselors taking care of 1,600 kids. That's probably not going to work out so well for you. Your pediatrician might know a counselor, but again, most counselors take 6 to 10 weeks to get an appointment with. That's why we came up with the texting program. But texting doesn't work for everybody either. That's
Yeah.
not a cure-all. There's no one solution. So then we've created a Zoom program, Zoom counseling that works in all 50 states. And you'll have a counselor in 7 days, a licensed therapist now, not somebody in some place in Cincinnati, a state licensed therapist to talk to your teen or your family if that's what you want to do. 1 hour every week for the next 12 weeks. And
I
we'll pick up
love
a
that.
study.
I
We pay
love
for that
that.
if you go through our website. And we do that because when we studied that, we didn't want parents who have multiple children to have to decide between getting this child therapy and putting food on the table for the other children.
Right.
And we found that was in conflict, especially for single moms that were just getting by. and working at a hard job, coming home, trying to put Stouffer's lasagna and a meal on the table and get themselves together and get homework done. They're working their butts off. There's no time for this. So we didn't want them to have to struggle with that. So we pick up the cost of that for 12 weeks. All right. All right. And so that's what we do. And then if not, we'll refer them even to inpatient counseling that's local to them in Cincinnati, in Melville, Long Island, in San Francisco area. We'll find a place that works for them if we have to, that's inpatient or outpatient adolescent health. We can't tell you that that counselor is the right counselor for you because that's a personality issue.
But
But
it's a start, but it's a
we can give
start.
you 4 names of people right now in your backyard that are accepting teen patients in most places. And they'll take them quickly because they're coming from our recommendation.
It's funny you
Versus,
mentioned Melville, Long Island. Like that's not even, that's pretty central. Long Island's large, but I'm on Long Island and that's not far away if someone had a teen within like a 50-mile radius.
yeah, but you're not going to travel 50 miles for counseling. We can find one in, Sayreville. We can find one in five cities. There's a lot of places in Long Island. We
Wow,
can
that's
find.
great. So Sayville's 20 minutes from me going east and Melville is 15 minutes going north. Wow.
We can do it if it's important. We'll come up with it.
That's fantastic. This is amazing. I'm really excited to get people to engage at a brighter day. Of course, we're going to put everything in the show notes and also not only to engage as far as need, but to donate and help. I'm assuming you have a donate button or something.
When you have a charity, money is the mother's milk of charity.
Of course,
I
yes.
feel like I'm running for office. I feel like I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives. I have to ask everybody for money. But
Yeah.
yes, it's the top button on the charity site. We
Okay.
need money. It's how you run it. Like we're paying for 3 months of therapy. That's not free.
Exactly. But okay. So hats off to you and to your team. Now, we talked about the signs, one of the signs personally that you experienced, because you can only really talk about your experience and of course what you've learned through working with teens and parents and whatnot, of course, but your personal experience. So that was one sign that you didn't notice. Now there was that you didn't address or you didn't, that maybe your wife should have been privy to, fine. And then you had that conversation in the kitchen, which is very chilling. I really got upset with that because, like any parent, you checked in and they said they were fine, and now that's left. What were there any other sign? Oh, the running at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
What other signs do you think might be there, just so it helps other parents that are listening?
Yeah, I think there was an earlier period where I didn't think he was eating right. We talked
Ah,
about this, and
ah,
it's really interesting when he had talk about isolation, which is the big thing. Withdrawal is a really, really big thing. Withdrawal from family. Let me give you an example of withdrawal from a family. Christmas dinner. You've got your whole family there. There are 20 people there. You'd be excited, or you went over your family's house, 20 people there, lots of kids. And your son, your daughter says to you, I'm really tired, mom, not into it. You mind if I go to my room and just relax?
yeah.
And you're thinking, they're tired. They've had a big week. Go ahead. They're withdrawing. They don't want to be around the festivities because they can't feel it. They can't participate in it emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And you took it as, well, they're tired. They're not feeling great. Go lie down. It's okay. See, that's withdrawal. And you didn't even think twice about it as a parent on Christmas or Thanksgiving or even their birthday. What do you want to do for your birthday? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal, mom. Really, it's not.
Right.
And
How old are your other children?
my twins are 30.
So you have a set of twins,
Yes.
boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl twins. And then he was 16 months younger.
He was 16 months younger, really close in age.
Very close, like raising triplets.
Right. What was that like for mom?
Well, and sadly, we got divorced when the kids were 7, 7, and 6 because she was just could not get over in her own way of depression and anger towards her life. And you don't direct it at your kids, you
Oh,
direct it at your husband. Um,
oh,
so
so you guys were divorced when the kids were 6 and 7.
6 and 7, yeah.
And then they went through what, the atypical visitations back and forth with mom and dad and whatnot.
Yeah, I had them for the first few years. I had them 5 out of every 7 days. And then we got closer to 50-50 after that.
Okay. What did that look like for you?
Uh, uh, Physically or emotionally?
Both.
Okay, so physically, I picked the kids up on Wednesday after school and I returned them on Sunday night.
Okay.
So
So
that,
emotionally, what did you, if you were to paint a picture on a canvas of what that felt like as a co-parent, as a single divorced father with these three children so young, um, what was the emotional essence underlying there?
well, you feel, I have to say, I think, I think you feel bad for your kids. I mean, there were a lot of times that I would drop my kids off at their mom's on a Sunday night and my daughter would break out crying.
Yeah.
Dad, I don't want to go. And she would do the same thing at mom's going back. So there was just too much emotion there. Um, I think in
Elliot,
the,
by the way, I'm not judging. My son was 3 when I divorced, and I trust me, I know what children go through emotionally. So I just want to open up the reality to parents so they understand, because there's so many things that go on in a child's uh uh cognitively, and also psychologically, cognitively, even their physiology uh reacts to the new divorce life, right? So that's why I ask you not to judge. So I'd love you to be an open book. We're always an open book on this show because it really helps people in a way where they hear conversations here on Beyond the Current Situation that they never hear anywhere else.
well, it's interesting. I think where the kids picked up some really negative, I don't have depression on my side. I tend to be a fairly upbeat, positive person looking for an outcome. I'm assuming it's the next person, but we're doing that. But their mom has, like I said, their mom has struggled. So they would comment to me every now and then that when I dropped them off at mom's house, because I would bring them right to the front door,
Mhm.
and they would walk in, it would be unlocked. They would walk in and she'd be sitting in her room and the room was dark.
Oh,
And so she was suffering from depression in multiple ways, but hiding it from the kids as well. But little by little, they were picking up on it too. And even Jake, in his suicide note, had said several, I think 3 times, Mom, I hope you can find happiness.
I heard you also say earlier at the top of this podcast, Mom, I hope you can get over this, in that first
Yeah, I hope you can
paragraph.
find happiness.
Oh, I hope you can find happiness. Was that in the
Happiness, what I
first
meant.
paragraph?
No,
But,
yeah, well, I was happy. So,
but
which meant that he knew that deep down his mom was not a happy person.
mhm. The children always know, by the way. She didn't hide a thing.
No, I don't think she could. I'll tell
Children
you,
are innate. They
here's another
innately.
interesting story that my twins learned, sadly. So Jake died in January. August comes around. And I said to my kids decided for the summer, my twins, Dad, we're not coming home from school for the summer. This is not good because the house is a house of death.
Oh
Yours and
my
mom's house. We can't do it. We're going to stay at school and take summer school and work. Okay. I said, okay, I'll come to you. And so it was the middle of summer. And I said, why don't we need to take a vacation, just the 3 of us. Just let's go somewhere. Let's walk and talk. I said, I got an idea. Let's go to the Grand Canyon.
God.
Can't do more walking there than there, right? So I've made arrangements to fly my son from St. Louis, his school, to LA, to my daughter's school, in the middle of the week. And I was going to come down on Friday and we were going to drive up to Colorado, to Arizona to go to the Grand Canyon.
Mhm.
And my daughter calls me on Thursday and says, Dad, I need you to go to mom's house right now. I said, why? I can't, I'm the ex-husband. I can't just show up at mom's house. He
Mhm.
said, Mom just said she's going to the cemetery and she's going to lie on top of Jake's grave and take her life.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And I said, oh my God, Mom said that to you? Which is a really heavy thing to tell a child. She never
Yeah,
told a child.
you think?
And so I called her up immediately. I hung up. I called her up. I said, hey, where are you? What's going on? She said, I'm in a very dark place, very bad place right now. And I think I'm going to end it. I think I'm just going to take some pills and go to the cemetery. And I said, Lisa, you can't do that. First of all, you already lost a child. Now they're going to lose their mother to suicide. They're going to get over their siblings. They'll get over their brother taking his life. They will. That's what siblings do. It'll become a conversation. But they're not going to get over their mother less than a year later taking her life. That's too much to ask for
My
a person.
goodness.
I said, I'm going to come down right now and we're going to 5150 you into the hospital.
Mhm.
And she said, you don't need to come. My best friend is coming and she's going to do it. I said, are you telling me the truth? She said, yes. I said, have her call me in 15 minutes or I'm on my way. And she
Okay.
did. She called
Okay.
me and she said, I'm taking her to the hospital and we're going to 5150. So
What's 5150?
5150 is you could put somebody into 48 or 72-hour watched suicide watch in a hospital. So
Okay.
the self-endangerment watch is what it is. It could be drugs, could be violent to themselves or violent to other people, but that's a 5150.
Okay.
They haven't committed a crime, so they're not being arrested. You're just asking for the hospital to put them on hold, where they can't leave. They physically have a guard, they can't leave.
Hmm. Hmm. And so she obviously didn't do
Yeah.
that.
And so it took her years and years to get beyond it where she could function, including electroshock therapy, which actually worked for her. That's what finally helped turn her around. But it was complicated. But to this day, I know my daughter, who just had 2 children, I've talked to her so often about postpartum depression and be aware of it, understand the lineage you came from,
Of
understand
course.
the signs of it. I've talked to her. And then my son, who's not married but lives in Washington, D.C., I talk about to him, how are you feeling? What's going on? Because he's alone
Of
and he
course.
lives across the country and he's very, very independent. And he feels very guilty. And I don't know if it's affecting his life or how it is, because he felt that he should have known that his brother was going to take his life, because he's the only one, he said, that heard conversation at mom's house and dad's house. And there were little snippets and he had the ability to put them together, but he didn't. And I said, Cody, you were 19 years old and
Well,
20 years.
he
You
didn't
can't
have the ability, but he had an instinct, but he
instinct.
didn't know how.
And he didn't think about it. And I said,
Poor
nobody at
boy.
19 or 20 puts these together. I don't hold you guilt ridden. I don't hold you guilty of this. Your mom doesn't. Society doesn't. Friends don't. You're going to have to find a way to let this go. I don't know how to do that. I'm not a counselor, because you didn't cause Jake to take his life. You didn't take his life for him. Jake did this. No one else did this, just Jake.
Are you afraid for your two children's lives, like every day? Do you fear of like something like that happening in their lives?
I do a little bit. So does I know their mom. We think about it. And I've had to talk to my kids over the years to say, listen, mom and I, when you're not calling us back, if 10 is ultimate panic and 0 is where you should be, and
Yeah.
sometimes you go up to 2 or 3 as a parent, because I wonder what they're doing today. They're probably doing something stupid. I need to know what it is. We don't have much distance between 0 and 10,
Right.
which most people do. Most people have, you're starting to scare me, give me a call. Now it's like, I've had my wife, I'm remarried now a long time. I've had to ask my wife to call up Cody and Alexa, my twins, and say, could you call your father? He's really worried today. And they've called
Oh.
me back. We're fine. We stop. Don't worry about it. I said, well, why did you call me back? I'm busy. In their world, they're busy. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just being not 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds or 30-year-olds like they are now. In
Mm-hmm.
my world, it's like, is everything all right? Is
Mm-hmm.
everything okay? And so with my daughter, who's just, like I said, her second child, who's only 5 weeks old, I was just down there and I said, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about? You're sleep deprived. You're living on an hour or 2 of sleep and then you're breastfeeding. What are you thinking about during those hours, during that time? What are you,
During the sleeping hours?
when you're waking up, listening to the baby cry, you know you have to get up
Mm-hmm.
and you know you've only slept for an hour in the last 8. What are your thoughts? Are they positive or are they negative? Because of course, you're exhausted. They're negative, like, I got to get out and do my thing here. But are they negative to the point I'm just tired and would love to sleep? Or are they negative, like, man, I wish I could make this somehow go away? What?
This is a great conversation to have right now because I nursed for 13 months.
Okay.
And Andrew, my son's name is Andrew, he didn't sleep through the night for 2 years. I never had one depressing moment when I was sleep deprived and nursing. And my thoughts were, oh, his fingers grew a little more. Like my thoughts were never leaning on depression. When I first gave birth, I had a little bit of postpartum, like I was crying on the sofa for no reason. Right? But think about it, physically, a woman's chemistry, like all the hormones are there, and then right after the baby's out, all the hormones are out of you. And I had a C-section, so like you go from one to the other hormonally. That's the chemistry that's going on, and that's a lot of the. I'm not a doctor, of course, but as I was told, is that's if you don't have really bad postpartum, if it's just in the beginning, that's a physical, a chemistry thing. That went away. But that's a great question to ask your daughter and anyone else that, because I hardly slept ever. I was more panicked if the baby didn't wake up to nurse. Like I loved waking up to the baby all night long. I thought that's my job. This is my purpose right now as a mother. And so you shouldn't feel anger and anxiety and depression.
You're absolutely right. But people do that.
Right. So that's a sign.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's a
Yep.
sign.
Yeah. This should be the best time in your life.
Exactly.
Giving birth, and you have a brand new life that is just absolutely amazing in front of you, and you're counting toes. I mean, my mother used to tell me that. She said, I can't tell you how many times I would count your fingers and toes and make sure you still had 10 of them. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
she said,
Yeah.
I want you to know I'll embarrass you forever, that I've kissed you everywhere in your body.
Of
And don't
course.
ask me what you want to ask me, because when you're on the changing table and you're sweet and you're nice and you're playing and it's fun and I'm tickling your stomach, we're just having a great time. And that's what we did.
Of course, which is why um a mother and father will always say, but I can only speak as a mother, uh, God help any of us that have to bury our child.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, I am so sorry, Elliot, that
Thank you
you
so much.
continue, you're welcome. And you continuously live through that fear that, oh my goodness, you know, two children left and may this never happen to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. What goes through your mind when now, where you are now, and with all that you've learned, when you think about the statistics now, like you talked about before, that where it is actually at 50% potentially fall into sadness or depression on campus or in high school, and or have potentially have suicide thoughts. 50%. What goes through your mind about those statistics today?
Well, I'm actually positive, not negative, because it's the first time ever that we're talking about this as a society. And so, if I was selling a product right now, if this was a product to sell, I would say we are in a heyday of buyers.
Great. Because
So
of the awareness?
the awareness, we're having open conversations. Even at the funeral, we talked about it. We decided from day one that we are going to be exceptionally open. I'm going to be exceptionally open about this because I wanted to do something about it right away. So we even talked about it at his funeral. We just had a couple of years back, we had in our two towns, we're right on the edge of two small towns, and they're all affluent towns, they're all upper middle class towns. They had a suicide within 2 days of each other, a suicide at each high school. One of the kids went down to the highway and did the same thing and jumped in front of a truck or car. And at the other one, she hung herself on the path. There's a pathway that she hung herself from a tree. The parents of the daughter that hung herself on the tree, there were two girls, I believe, hung herself on a tree. They decided they weren't going to talk about it. They want no one knowing about it. And
Of
every
course.
kid in that school knew about it in 15 minutes. But they decided they were going to be silent and bury this. They were embarrassed. The old school. The ones at the other school in Lafayette, they decided they would talk about it like us immediately. And they asked if Friday night they can have a town meeting outside, and that we could have speakers speak from the school and let kids vent with a microphone about their lives. And then the school came to me and asked if we could create these backpacks, which we had, for the kids there, for the teens, and give these out with resources on stress and depression for teens and where to go and if you're feeling this way and so forth. And
That's
so we
beautiful.
participated.
That's
So look
beautiful.
at the difference between those two schools within 2 days.
Yeah.
Open, let's fix this, let's talk about the problem, versus the old world, which is no, let's not talk about it. Something's wrong with us. Let's not talk
Right.
about it.
Let's sweep it under the rug and act like everything's fine, even though it's not.
I
Yeah.
want you to know my dad, when cancer was first discovered, he said he was pretty young. They were first talking about cancer, as a disease that killed people. It wasn't even called the disease at that point,
Hmm.
cancer.
Hmm.
It was called you're sick with cancer.
Mm.
My dad was told that if you meet somebody with cancer, and he was probably a teenager when this happened, you need to get out of that room because you might catch it.
Yeah,
Sounds stupid, doesn't it? Hey,
because there was no education on it.
none. So somebody with lung cancer or pancreatic cancer or colon cancer, he thought he could get it by just sitting next to him. Because
Right.
that's what that's what adults were telling him. Leave the room now.
Mm.
Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing?
it is
So
amazing. And look how far we've
ignorance,
come.
ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is ignorance. And as a
Correct.
parent, I tell you that if your children might be suffering from stress or depression, it's your duty to find out. And inaction is not a solution.
Correct. I want to ask you a question. I'm just going to put it out there because I have done so many shows and I've touched upon many, many topics that no one, again, ever wants to talk about. Um, did you ever look into any other situational cause that could have springboarded him into depression aside from potential mental illness that came down from, his mom or
We did look,
ancestors?
it's a good question. We looked at concussions because he played ice hockey. And he played ice hockey at a pretty high level all the way through college. So till the week he died, he was playing ice hockey. So he had a few concussions. He didn't have a lot of them. I played football and ice hockey growing up. I had way more than he did. And we know what a concussion is now.
Hmm.
So sometimes you just get your ears are ringing, that's a concussion. When I was young, that was called getting your bell rung.
Hmm.
And it was not a concussion. So he had that. I got a call very quickly from from the state of Montana, because they have so many suicides in Montana. They actually have a department of suicide prevention. And he called me up and he said, I'd like to talk to you about your son if you're open to it. And he started to talk about, the NFL problem with concussions and the shrinking of the brain and so forth. And he said, can I ask how many concussions your son had? I
Hmm.
said, probably 2 or 3. And he said, do you think that led to his death? And I said, no. He said, well, how do you know that? I said, how could I possibly know that? For sure. I'm not a doctor, and we didn't examine his brain upon death. They took his brain, they did an autopsy on him, but I don't know what they did with the brain and so forth. But I said, no. He said, and he asked the question, do you regret putting your son in hockey now that you know he had a few concussions?
Hmm.
And I said, that's a horrible question, because what you just asked me is, do you now realize that you may have doomed your son?
Yeah, that could have been a more responsible question.
Yeah. And I said, so if my son goes into soccer, which has more concussions than hockey and has more injuries than hockey,
Mm.
because heads come together and balls bounce off heads at a pretty high level, and girls
Mm.
and boys in soccer, high school soccer, get concussions.
Mhm.
Would you ask that of a parent about heading the ball? Did you realize that having your daughter head the ball to score a goal might have caused her death?
Mhm.
It's a terrible question to ask. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Um,
What
but
if
some people are pretty wacky on how they think, and they're trying to get, too many people are trying to get this square hole with a square peg to always fit. And
No,
you know
and
something?
everything's different.
Yeah,
The
and life
reason
isn't always fair. I look, life isn't fair. My son took his life. It's not fair.
it's not fair.
It happened. I don't put any blame on it. He took his life. I'm upset with his mom to a degree. I've gotten over it because I've got to deal with her. We've got 2 other kids. I think she should have known more and seen more because she suffered herself, but it happened. She didn't take his life. He did at the end of the day. And that's
Mhm.
something we all have to understand. I had a psychologist come in my office here a couple of years ago, and she was sitting on my couch in my office. You can't see it, but it's an office with a couch and a desk, and it's a business office.
Mhm.
And she said, tell me about your son again. And I said, I know I'm not supposed to use the word commit suicide, because commit implies a crime in the old world crime. So they say your son took his life, but everybody knows when I say commit suicide, what I mean by that. So
Mhm.
it takes away the sugarcoating. And
Mhm.
she said, well, you really can't say that he took his life either. That's no longer politically correct.
Ugh.
And I said, well, what's politically correct? She said, your son had a successful suicide.
You're not gonna say that, are you?
And I said, and I looked at her, I said, don't ever say that to me again.
Don't ever say that again. Yeah,
Don't
don't.
ever say that to a parent. You say that to parents? Don't say that. They had a successful suicide. That's a terrible thing to say.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to say how you feel on here. All of my listeners know, and even the non-listeners, which is why maybe they're not on regularly listening, but they know that there's a huge uh, essence of conservative, old school in everything that I do, and everything I do and say, even in my approach for coaching. Am I open-hearted? Yes. Am I open-minded? To a degree. When it comes to things like this, it's an absolute no, don't ever say that on my show. I've had a successful suicide.
It's horrible. It's
That's
horrible.
it's an oxymoron, first of
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And it's also saying it's okay. Like, which by the way, I'm not saying it's not okay. And I want to be really clear about this whole kind of immediate conversation. It's a beautiful thing when someone can say and come to terms with, but I mean, really come to terms with this in their heart and mind and say, my loved one had made a decision a year ago or several years ago to leave this earth and go on the other side of the veil, if you will, go to a place where he or she felt they could have peace. That is what I feel would be a tolerable space to be as someone who has to live with their loved one's suicide. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, Look, whatever somebody needs to say to make them feel more comfortable, that's up to them. I
That's
would
up to
never,
them.
I would
But
never judge that. Say what you need to say. And people have different ideas of death,
okay,
where suicide is a sin, suicide, you go to hell, suicide, everybody goes to heaven. There's
but
no
that
after.
kind of makes me mad. Like, oh,
Everybody,
that's like a big sin. You're going to hell for
well, I had a
suicide.
woman come in my house. We were working on a kitchen when he took his life. And so we stopped it. And it took about 5 months before we said, okay, let's finish this now. And so, but in the meantime, certain things didn't fit right. And so we had the salesperson from the kitchen store come in and sit down with us to redesign some stuff. And my wife asked me to be there. She said, look, you get it more and all that stuff. So I talked and I said, ladies, are you done with me now? Because I got to go to work. It was like 8:30 in the morning. I got to go. Everybody knows we're good with money and all that. And I came to the office. And as soon as I left, she said, your house looks different. Why does it look different than the last time I was here? And why is there a big picture of 8x10 of what looks like your son in front of the TV?
Mm.
And which is still there. And she said, well, sadly, he took his life, committed suicide in January. And she's strong Catholic, this person. She said, oh my God, he's going to hell. He's going to burn forever. And she really believed it. And my wife said to him, who Jake was, she was in Jake's life for more than half his life. And she said to him, you need to leave my house now and never come back. I'm so glad my husband didn't hear that,
Oh my
because that's a
goodness.
horrible thought.
That
So look, there are
so
people who believe that. It's not for me to change your beliefs. There are people who feel that death and that when you die, it's over. There's nothing happens after. I have to believe that when I go to the cemetery every month and I walk on his grave, because there's a plaque on the ground and I have to stand on top of the grave to look at the plaque to get close enough. And that's my way of talking to the sky or to him or to God. And I have to believe there's a heaven, and I have to believe there's a heaven. Now, there's a part of me that also believes, and hopefully that he was born again and reincarnated, and maybe this is hell, I don't know, but maybe he was reincarnated and he was born again to a family in Chicago or Bangladesh. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
exactly. But it's what gives you what brings you the peace. And that's exactly the point I was making. When you come to a place where you can consider it in a positive as you can possibly make it. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Um, just to bring you into some sort of reasonably or considerable amount of peace with it, because You said it before. What's done is done. You can't go back.
we have to live in this world, I
And you
talk
have to
about
live
this,
in the present moment as well. You can't
absolutely.
live in the past.
And I've got children, I've got grandchildren. You need to be present for them and a wife.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you have to be in that world, whatever it takes. So for me, I obviously talk about this a lot, and I'll end up going to the cemetery probably this weekend sometime, and just to be alone. I don't want anybody near me, and I'll talk to him. I'll do my prayer. I'll apologize to him, because I
Oh,
always apologize, because I'm his parent. I should have
yeah.
been able to, that's my job. Number one job as a father, my dad taught me, is number two is to provide a livelihood. Number one, you're in charge of the safety and security of your family at all
Yes.
times. Whatever that means, you're in charge of that. And so in some ways I failed as a parent, even though he's at college and I couldn't have done anything. But he died on my watch.
Yeah.
And so I owe him an apology for that. Now, there's no psychologist that would ever agree with me with that. I've talked to enough of them over the years. They said, you don't owe him an apology. And I said, well, it comes out of my mouth. I don't know what to tell you. It comes out, but it
Elliot,
is what it is.
it's so funny you say that because you have the most credibility because you experienced it. I don't care what degree someone has, what master's degree in this psychology, whether it's or psychiatry. Sure, you know medicine. Sure, or even psychology, you know what you've learned as far as psychology. But when it comes to very specific things, I believe that you are 100% uh, informed because you lived it.
Yep.
When, for me, like I had my past story, like there isn't a psychologist in the world that did not, if that did not experience what I experienced. So I am an expert in domestic violence, not this counselor that is, which we need counselors that are helping others, but the counselors and the psychologists and the psychiatrists that are trying to get people through that. They don't really, unless they've been at one time in their life a victim, they don't really understand the ins and outs of it like you do. So you understand the ins and outs of how a parent deals with teen suicide because you lived it.
True.
So don't ever apologize for that.
Okay.
Yeah, you are an expert in your field. Now, speaking of that, uh, what overall message would you like parents to have today, uh, as far as prevention or even proactive approaches to teen suicide, depression, and thoughts of suicide?
I think the first thing, positive action step a parent can take is better conversations and ask better questions.
Right.
That's it. That's because you will learn everything. And then if your gut is telling you that something I'm hearing doesn't feel right, then ask a better question about it. Ask a question that's not yes, no, but ask a question where they give the opportunity in a non-judgmental way to share what's going on.
So an open-ended question, don't be judgmental. Let's go through those steps that you said before. The first was good questions, right? Dinner time, no devices, a weekly walk,
And drive
right?
time. And drive time.
And driving time, driving to a sport, driving kids. I know I used to use those same times, actually. It was more, I guess it was innate, and I was a single divorced mom. I was the mom that drove the kids to the party, or I drove the kids to when there was like away games. My son was always with me, and I would have maybe the other boys. But the point is, those were great times that I couldn't agree more that you could really ask those questions and also connect, just engage and connect with your child, right? What will be the third one?
If you feel something's not right, then inaction is not a good place to be. The next step would be is let's find out what could work. Remember, there's no one size shoe that fits everybody, whether it be texting. I would make sure every teen, my goal for our charity, 35 million teens in America, my goal in high school, my goal is every single one of them knows about it, has a little card in their pocket that knows how to get texting help. That would be our goal for our charity. It's
I
impossible.
love that you have texting, and I love
Texting
24/7 because
24/7, because even on Christmas, because can you imagine they left the Christmas table, they went to their room because they don't really want to partake in that. And then they got help while everybody's in the other room and said, man, this sucks. Any ideas? And you have somebody who's saying, well, how are you feeling? What's going on?
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and that's what the texting does and on holidays. Because sometimes holidays are the toughest. You know, I write these articles. We have a semi-monthly newsletter that comes out, touches more than 5,000 people every month, which is amazing with resources. And I usually pick on a holiday. So I pick on Mother's Day coming up as an example. Okay. Mother's Day said that should be a fabulous day, but who is this about? It's about mom, which is okay. You deserve it. You've done a great job. What if your child is feeling kind of bad and it's all about you? Is that going to make them feel bad or good? And it's probably going to make them feel worse. Like, look, mom, I'm glad you're happy. I'm going to go to my room now because they're feeling worse.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, all right, we're going to have dinner in 2 hours. I'll see you then. I know. And so holidays, every holiday, Father's Day is coming up here. Every holiday can make a kid feel more isolated because it's not about them. And it doesn't need to be about them. But teenagers are self-serving. They're in people. It is all about them when you're a teenager. It's not about you as a parent. You're 1,000 years old when you've got teenagers. And so they need more help because they don't even know they don't know what to tell you they're really feeling. They don't understand it, especially boys that are what I call stupid, because I was.
Right.
You're just dumb as a boy.
Right. Did your kids ever during your divorce time, you wouldn't know when they were with their mother, but did your kids have Jake was 16 years younger, so we're talking about his situation. Did he have like regular like a mentor in school, in high school, or did he have like a babysitter, or was there anyone in his life that was like regular?
No, I don't think so. I don't think he had a mentor. I think he had a lot of hockey coaches.
Hockey coaches.
He played hockey so in multiple teams and travel hockey and
Right.
aggressive hockey and things like
And
that.
how was his relationships with his coaches? Did you have those
Yeah,
conversations?
most of them were really, really good. I have to tell you that it's very interesting. So when he died, we got a call. We were flying up there to go get his body. And the university dean called us. And I was in the Vegas airport. And she said, I have to ask you a difficult question. I said, what is it? She said, are you planning on hiring an attorney to sue us? And I
Why?
said, what? She said, are you planning on hiring an attorney? It's an important question. I hadn't even given that a second of thought. And I said, absolutely not. First of all, we're not those kind of people.
Right.
And secondly, I have a suicide note from him. This is not your fault. She said, okay. And I said, we're going to be there to greet you and to help you through this process. Well, we met somebody later whose son committed suicide, and they said, we're suing the school for not taking any action to understand our children's needs. And so the school was very distant from that person, as you can imagine. And so the entire hockey family greeted us to help them, clean out his dorm. I gave him the hockey equipment. I gave him every penny in his wallet. I said, here, use this for kids that can't buy equipment. Use this for kids that need books. It wasn't much money in there. Here's his clothing. Use this for kids that just don't have enough clothes, whatever it is. Here's everything. You can have everything. I took home his helmet. I said, let me have the helmet so I can keep his helmet. His mom said, all I want is his blanket because it smells like him. And you guys can have everything else. And we talked about it. And the hockey coach, he said, Jake scored last week 5 goals in 1 game. And this week on Tuesday, and he died Thursday night, he scored 7 goals in a game. He's leading the league in goal scoring. And that wasn't enough.
Almost like he wanted to go out with a bang.
Yeah. And he said, you know what's really sad? And he said, shame on me as a biology professor here at the University of Montana. is that when he scored those 5 and 7 goals, I mean, in the locker room, of course, it was really joyous because we killed the other team. After a few minutes, he sat alone and changed.
Really?
He moved to isolated himself so he wouldn't share in that joy. He was already pulling apart from it so he could reconcile his isolation.
So
And
this is a red flag for coaches and teachers, and there's
you know,
just a red flag for for college students, the teachers, the coaches. That again, that isolation comes in many forms. That should have been like, what's the matter? Why is he by himself?
and so he was upset. The coach was upset. Doug was so upset with himself. He said, "How did I not know
Right.
that he was doing this?" And he said, "You know something? I looked at it and I said, boy, he's kind of quirky. I even
Ugh,
told my wife how quirky he is to want to sit alone. And neither one of us, and she was a pharmaceutical professor at the medical school. He's at the graduate level and undergraduate level as a biology professor. Smart people who had raised kids and did not put that together with depression.
yeah, and
And it turns out that one of their daughters that they didn't realize also had some depression. And it took
mm,
them some time to figure it out. These are normal people. They're not abnormal. They're not selfish. They're regular, salt of the earth people that have jobs and families and care and donate to charity and serve on civic boards and didn't see it.
all people and all quote unquote, I never use this word, but for the sake of vocabulary, all victims are normal. It's not all someone from like this weird environment or underprivileged, like normal is normal. And so you're making a very valid point that what I'm hearing loud and clear is we need to take the potential of suicide very serious.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's out there so much. And so, the numbers are very, very high. You could look up online number of suicides. There are a lot of points. We think somebody commits suicide at 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, that they got depressed. Sometimes that was 20 years of depression.
Exactly. It's been compiled up, which is really what happened. Like those, like I told you, Anne Romer, who came on my show, and she's also an author. Um, like their brother waited till he was like 50. They're like, what?
Yeah, and he'd been
You know?
feeling sadness
Yes.
probably for
Yeah.
a very long time, and didn't know how to verbalize it, doesn't
Right.
understand it. Um,
Decades.
it's hard. It's
So,
more we talk about it, the better we're going to get at it.
right. Again, and your messages really align. It's you're not alone. Have open conversation, talk to someone you feel you can trust, right? Get the support that you need. And just again be really open uh with your feelings. I want to ask you a question because the essence of this show is beyond the current situation. How did you ultimately get beyond that situation, Elliot?
Yeah, and I don't want to use the word beyond. I think, how do you deal with it better? Because it's still a hole. His picture is still 8 by 10, is still next to my TV set. He's
Hmm.
the screensaver in my office with the other 2 kids. It's the
Hmm.
last picture I have of the 3 of them together. They're my screensavers.
Of
Um,
course.
and so I had, because I started the charity, I had to keep talking about this over and over. It's the purpose of the charity, or the original purpose of the charity,
And
is
is
to
it
make.
healing? Is it healing for you?
It does. It
Okay.
does. I'm able to talk about it, not break out into tears and things like that. So that's a really good thing. Having, right before Jake died, my stepdaughter moved in with us with her 2-year-old son out of Arizona. And so when he took his life, Jake, this little guy was 3 now. And we had already kicked the father out of the house.
Mhm.
And so now I was the main man in his life. He's still living with us 10 years later. And he's everything to me. I mean, I stand in front of a steam shovel for this kid. I mean, he's wonderful. I owed it to him to be in the moment with him
Yeah.
all the time. And so sometimes he would say, Grandpa, why are you crying? And because a movie triggered it. A movie would have a kid, in there, a teen in there, or even a youthful kid, and it would bring me back to a sad place.
Mm.
So I was always in there, and sometimes when I would drive with him and he would say, "What do you think? Where's Jake? I don't understand where Jake is." And then he was 5. "Where's Grandpa? Where's Jake?" And we wouldn't use the word suicide or death. It's not appropriate for a 5-year-old.
Of course not.
Yeah. And I would say, "Jake is in the clouds.
Mm-hmm.
He's watching us every day." And so he'd look up. He'd be
Oh,
staring at the clouds. I'm trying to see him Grandpa, what cloud do you think he's in?
yeah.
And so you have to be in there and hold it together, because believe me, you want to burst into tears at that moment. And so we took him to Universal and Disneyland here in California. And we get on a plane. I said, "Cole, I'm going to give you the window seat, and Grandma and I are going to sit next to you, and I'll take the middle. Grandma's going to take the aisle." And I brought some cards and some games, and it's not a very long flight. And he said, "You know what I'm going to do, Grandpa? When we get up into the clouds in the airplane, he'd never been on a plane before, I'm going to look in there and see if I can see Jake."
Oh,
You've got to be in that moment for him.
yeah.
So that actually helped me a lot,
Yeah.
just to be in a moment. And then I had 2 older kids now that were 20 and 21 and growing and graduating, and they had relationship issues of their own. I needed to be there for them, and I need to go visit them, and I need to be present. And then I wanted to be a good husband. I was in a long-term marriage, in my first marriage that ended after 18 years. I'm with my wife today. We've been together 20 years. I'm not the guy that needs to jump around and drive a Corvette and pierce my ear and get a new tattoo. I'm somebody that is sticky and wants to be sticky. And, they say, if you want to be a good husband, then be worthwhile of being a good husband.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love that. Say
Yeah.
that again.
If you want to be a good husband, be worthwhile of being a good husband. Somebody your wife can look at and say, "That's a good man I'm married to." And then you could do the same thing for her. And
Yes.
somebody once told me that if you wake up in the morning and you think of something nice you could do for your spouse, each one of you think of that, you will always have a great marriage.
Mhm.
Because you'll be thinking, "Well, I think I'm going to bring home dinner tonight for her. I think I'm
Mhm.
going to take her out. I think I'm going to come home and ask if there's something I could do for her, rub her feet." Or you're going to think about that. And
Yes.
it's going to put you in a good place, rather than, okay, the grass would be so much greener with the 26-year-old Mary Lou that lives down the street,
Yes.
which is
Uh,
how a lot of guys think. And you're not going to be married very long if you do that.
yeah.
So I needed to be in that for my wife too. It's very interesting. One of her closest friends that she dropped as a friend told her, said, "Listen, beware of Elliot changing and pushing you away. It happens all the time."
Yeah,
And
that's society talking. That's not reality.
she told me that. And I said, "Look, I don't know how I'm going to react as this thing unfolds, but she can't be your friend, because I never want to be around this woman ever."
Of course.
Yeah. But people are like that. You've got to be present. And present means I've got to be in the right now with you, or more importantly, with family, with my children, the people that are most important to me in my life. I need to be a rock in their lives. And they've sent me notes over the years, like for birthdays and Father's Day, saying, "Dad, you're the rock.
I
You
love
are
it.
the rock." And I didn't cry at his funeral. I cried very privately, versus what his mom that was wailing away. And I just said, "I need to be a rock." And there was a friend of mine that asked me, "Elliot, I was watching you the whole time. Why didn't you cry?" And I said, "Because I needed to be present for my twins.
I
I needed to
totally
be
get
their
that.
rock to know that we're going to get through this."
I get
And
that.
that's hard to do. And privately, I cried plenty of times.
Of
And
course you did. I'm
and
sure
I've
you
walked
did.
away from some movies watching that they're silliest things to cry at, and
Yeah.
walked away to the bathroom. Just, I need a moment of my own, because
Yeah.
that's life. And a movie can put you back in there.
I
It can set
know.
you off in that. And so you just need to be there. We were watching a show, and I forgot what it was. And it was a really popular show. And he was talking about this constant flashback show of their youth and all that stuff. And I was just crying. I had tears coming down. And my wife said to me, she didn't notice that. And she showed me, she said, "All right, we have to put this off right now." It was
Of
a good
course.
show. It
Yeah.
just was putting me in a bad place.
Of course.
So
So
you
the,
can't be in bad places,
can't be in bad
that kind of
places. Know your triggers. And when it happens, just
thing.
you got to remove yourself. And I love that. And I have to say, be proud, Elliot, for how you did stay present through it all. Be proud that you have maintained a wonderful, as you put it, sticky. I love that. I never heard that saying, by the way. You know how you remain sticky like that? It's great. I- in a really great marriage and relationship with your children. And I don't even like the word step, but you said step, I'll repeat you, but your your stepchild, grandchild.
You
And
can't use the term step grandchild.
I can't stand that, right?
That's a
But
terrible term.
yeah,
He's either your grandchild and you're a grandparent or you're not.
that's why. So, because you said I had my
Yeah, no, my stepdaughter moved in with her
oh,
son.
your stepdaughter with the
Daughter moved
son.
in with her
But
son. Yeah, no, no. Like
even that,
he's my grandchild all the way.
exactly, because even like that word step, I just the labels. It's your, your daughter, your grandchild, and you've maintained, you've overcome in such a way where you have been present, which and present coaching, that's like my whole system is all about presence and being in the here and now and making uh those those choices and decisions to create the experiences that you wish to experience one present moment at a time, right? So I really applaud you and I want to thank you for coming on here so bravely and allowing me to ask such personal questions, Elliot. I didn't intend on you answering all of them if you didn't want to. So since you did, I want to thank you. A big hug, virtual hug to you right now. Please tell us, how can our viewers and listeners support you in a brighter day?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on, Lily. It's www.abrighterday.info. .org works too, but abrighterday.info. My cell number is 510-206-1103, and I'm on the West Coast, so try to remember to not call me at 4 in the morning. And people do. We take the call. And then you can reach me at Elliot, ELLIOT, at abrighterday.info.
Fantastic. And of course, all this is going to be on the show notes. Now, just a few distinctions that I'd like to just bring out by the time, like as we close up this episode, are go back, everyone, rewind, listen to the beginning where Elliot talks about those key things about the questions and where to ask those questions and all of that great information that can help you prevent and prevent the suicide or potential suicide attempts and bring you into more awareness and actually keep you in touch with your child more. And then the other thing is how to overcome, how to live through it, or how to, as Elliot puts it, deal with it every day, day-to-day situation, so that you too can be the rock of your family like Elliot Kallen is. Thank you, Elliot, for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lily.
You bet.